Before we begin, you have to understand something. This is not a story about conquest, because conquest is loud and it announces itself. Conquest is when armies are crashing into other armies on open fields, banners raised, horns screaming, two sides agreeing, however briefly, to destroy each other in the same place at the same time. But what Subutai did was quieter than that, and far more terrible. Because he didn't conquer kingdoms, he deleted them, surgically and methodically, with the calm precision of a man who had already won before the first arrow left the first bow. By the time his enemies understood what was happening to them, it was already over. The trap had already closed. 32 nations, 65 battles, 0 defeats. Not one. In a military career spanning 5 decades, across terrain that stretched from the Pacific coast of China to the shores of the Adriatic Sea, against enemies ranging from Persian sultans to Teutonic knights to Russian princes to Chinese emperors, Subutai never lost. History gave you Caesar. It gave you Napoleon. It gave you Alexander, who wept because he had no more worlds to conquer. It forgot to tell you about the blacksmith's son from the Mongolian steppe who was better than all of them. This is his story, and by the end of it, you will understand exactly why the civilized world got lucky and how close it came to not surviving him at all. The steppe does not raise soft men.
If you want to hear more stories like this, battles where strategy defeated strength, where the impossible became real, where one decision changed the course of nations, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of history.
It is a place of brutal extremes, winters that freeze the marrow inside the bone, summers that bake the earth to cracked ceramic, winds that arrive without announcement and leave without apology. There is no shelter the steppe feels obligated to provide, no comfort it considers its responsibility to offer. You either learn its rhythms or it kills you, and it has no particular preference which outcome you choose. Subutai was born into this landscape around 1175. The son of a blacksmith, Jarchagudai of the Uriankai clan, he grew up watching iron shaped by heat and force into something useful, something precise, something capable of holding an edge. He learned the lesson early, and he never forgot it. He came to Genghis Khan as a boy, one of 4 brothers who entered the great Khan's service, bound not by blood to the rising power of the Mongol unification, but by loyalty, by choice. And Genghis Khan, who had a genius for reading the quality of men the way a jeweler reads the quality of stone, saw immediately what stood before him. Not a warrior. Warriors were everywhere, and most of them were dead within a decade. What he saw was a mind. A mind that processed battle the way other men processed breathing, automatically, constantly, always several steps ahead of the present moment. By his late 20s, Subutai commanded a Tumen, 10,000 men, an entire operational army answering to a man who had not yet reached 30, and he was already doing something no other commander in the medieval world was doing. He was thinking in time, not just where to place his cavalry and where to feint and where to strike. He was thinking days ahead, weeks ahead, accounting for what his enemy would do in response to what he hadn't done yet. He was playing a game of chess while his opponents were still learning the rules of drafts. When the result came, it was never a fair fight. To understand Subutai, you have to understand what Mongol cavalry actually was, because the image most people carry is wrong. It was not a horde. The word horde implies chaos, implies numbers overwhelming tactics, mass overwhelming skill, the mindless pressure of sheer human weight crushing opposition by volume alone. That is not what Subutai commanded. What he commanded was a precision instrument. Think of it less like a wave and more like a scalpel, except a scalpel that could travel 160 kilometers in a single day, needed no supply lines, ate in the saddle, carried its logistics on the backs of rotating spare mounts, and could disappear from one horizon and reappear on another before an enemy had finished sending a messenger to report its last known position. Each Mongol warrior maintained a string of horses, 3, 4, sometimes 5. He rotated between them constantly, never exhausting any single animal, sustaining a pace of movement that his opponents simply could not match. They were used to armies that moved at the speed of infantry, at the speed of supply wagons, at the speed of roads. Subutai's army moved at the speed of weather, and like weather, it struck where it chose, when it chose, in a form its victims had not prepared for. The first principle was the feigned retreat, and it was not, as some have suggested, a simple trick. It was a sophisticated psychological operation built on the exploitation of a very specific human weakness, the intoxication of apparent victory. His riders would engage, strike hard enough to draw blood, hard enough to ignite the instinct to pursue, then turn and run, and the enemy, flooded with the chemical certainty of triumph, would follow. The second principle was simultaneity, striking multiple targets at the same moment across distances so vast that no conventional military thinking could connect the attacks into a coherent picture. While one army was burning a city in the north, another was destroying a relief force in the east, and a third was cutting the roads to the south. By the time a king understood that every pillar holding up his military position was collapsing at once, the pillars were already rubble. The third principle, and this is the one that historians consistently underestimate, was intelligence. Subutai was fanatical about it in a way that had no parallel in medieval warfare. Before a major campaign, Mongol networks of merchants, envoys, and embedded agents had already been operating for months, mapping roads, counting garrison strengths, cataloging fortifications, identifying political rivalries, locating the personal hatreds between neighboring lords that could be exploited to ensure that when the moment came, no one would come to anyone's aid. And when the moment came, Subutai was already there, waiting. In the winter of 1237, Subutai turned his attention to the Russ principalities. What followed was not a military campaign in any sense his opponents would have recognized. It was a systematic demonstration of what happens when a military genius operates against enemies who are still thinking in categories he discarded years ago. The Rus princes were not fools. They were experienced warriors, battle-hardened men who had spent their lives fighting on the Eurasian steppe. They understood winter warfare. They had fought nomadic peoples before. What they had never encountered was coordination at this scale, at this speed, with this level of pre-planned precision. Subutai did not march on one city. He did not lay siege. He moved like fire moves, not in a line, but in all directions simultaneously, each tendril finding the path of least resistance, each front cutting off the possibility of retreat or reinforcement for the others. Vladimir fell, Suzdal fell, Rostov, Yaroslavl, Tver, each isolated, each struck before its prince could determine whether the army that had just destroyed his neighbor was the same army now outside his own gates, or a different one entirely. It was a different one. The Russian princes attempted to coordinate, to combine their forces, to present a unified resistance that might blunt the assault. At the Sit River in March of 1238, a coalition force assembled in the frozen forest, and Subutai let them assemble, let them feel the temporary comfort of numbers, the brief warmth of collective resolve. Then he hit them from 3 directions at once. The Battle of the Sit River lasted hours. The Russian coalition was annihilated. Prince Yuri II of Vladimir died in the snow. His head, according to the chronicles, was found separately from his body. The Rus principalities, the political and cultural heart of medieval Russia, were effectively destroyed as functioning states. They would spend the next 2.5 centuries paying tribute to the descendants of the man who sent Subutai north that winter. 2.5 centuries, because Subutai spent a few months in the cold. Everything Subutai had built, every tactic refined, every campaign learned from, every intelligence network cultivated, came together in the spring of 1237. 241. What he planned was, by any military standard across any era of history, extraordinary. A simultaneous two-front invasion of Central Europe. Two separate army groups, separated by the Carpathian Mountains, a natural barrier that would make communication between them nearly impossible, that would prevent any mutual support, that made the operation a calculated gamble requiring absolute confidence in the synchronization of forces that could not see each other. The Northern Force, under Prince Batu, would sweep through Poland, drive north through Krakow, shatter whatever resistance assembled, and prevent any Polish or German force from moving south to reinforce Hungary. Subutai himself would command the southern thrust through the Carpathians into Hungary, straight at King Bela IV and the 65,000 men he was assembling to stop what he understood correctly was the most dangerous military force ever to threaten his kingdom. The timing had to be precise. If Poland was struck too early, word would reach Hungary and Bela would have time to adjust. Too late, and Polish forces might break free to reinforce the south. On April 9th, 1241, the Northern Force met a combined army of Polish knights, Teutonic knights, and Templar cavalry at Legnica. The Europeans were good soldiers. They were brave. They were experienced. They charged into what appeared to be a retreating Mongol line with everything they had. The Mongols used smoke-burning bundles of reeds that generated thick black clouds, blinding the charging cavalry, breaking their formation, severing units from their commanders at the moment the counterattack came. The Duke of Silesia died on that field, and his army was destroyed. 9 sacks of ears were collected from the fallen, according to the chronicles, a Mongol accounting practice that suggests a level of methodical efficiency more disturbing, somehow, than simple slaughter. 48 hours later, Subutai closed the trap at the Sajo River. The Battle of Mohi on April 11th was not a battle. It was a demolition. Bela's army was lured across the river, struck from multiple directions simultaneously, pushed toward an escape corridor that Subutai had deliberately left open because men who believe they can flee do not form defensive squares, and men running for their lives are far easier to destroy than men who have decided to die in place. 65,000 Hungarian soldiers, shattered in a single morning. Bela IV fled on horseback, pursued by Mongol riders across half of Europe, reaching the Adriatic coast by the skin of his survival instinct alone. And Subutai's cavalry reached the Adriatic behind him. They stood at the edge of the sea and looked west. There was nothing. No army, no fortification, no coalition, no military force of any meaningful capability between Subutai's horsemen and the Atlantic Ocean. France, the Holy Roman Empire, the Italian city-states, England, none of them had anything remotely capable of stopping what was now standing on the eastern shore of the Adriatic in the spring of 1241. Western Europe, as a civilization, was one man's decision away from ceasing to exist. That man was not Subutai. In December 1241, Ogedai Khan, the Great Khan, son of Genghis, supreme authority of the Mongol Empire, died in Mongolia. Subutai turned his armies east. Not because he was defeated, not because he had encountered resistance he could not overcome, but because the law of the empire demanded the presence of its generals at the Kurultai, the great council that would determine succession. Western Europe was spared by a death on the other side of the world. It did not know this. It did not know how close the darkness had come. The chronicles recorded a great deliverance, attributed it to God's mercy, and moved on. The men who had actually saved them never knew their names. Subutai retired after the European campaign. He was in his mid-60s, ancient by the standards of a life spent in the saddle, in the cold, in the killing work of 5 decades of continuous warfare. He died in his bed, around 1248, peacefully, apparently, surrounded by the quiet that he had so rarely allowed his enemies to experience. 65 battles, 32 nations, 20 major campaigns across a span of territory that dwarfs every other military career in recorded history.